Hi, today we're going to talk about surviving living with a PTSD victim. This I understand. I completely understand because my father came back from Korea with PTSD. My uncle came back from Vietnam with PTSD. I was diagnosed with complex PTSD as a 16-year-old. And the man I married 32 years ago has PTSD from being in Vietnam. It really doesn't matter if it's PTSD from war or if it's PTSD from something else. There really isn't a difference because it's an emotional reaction to a traumatic event. The difference between complex PTSD and war-induced PTSD is that complex PTSD is usually over a long period of time, like your childhood, and repeated intermittent issues that begin to cause you the constant trauma that war does. War is when you're, of course, hearing shells and having to dock down against fire and avoid different areas and that sort of thing. So there's not really a lot of difference in terms of how your behavior changes, but there is a great deal of difference in how you become a victim of that diagnosis, okay? I've discovered that understanding PTSD in myself and in others has made it a great deal easier to both be dealing with the same thing. One of the largest and most prevalent problems is forgiveness. It has to be always clear that the fight or flight mechanism in yourself or in your spouse or your friend or whoever it is who has PTSD can be triggered by anything. I mean, really, by just anything. It can be triggered by getting angry about something. It can be just the slightest thing going wrong. And it can also be an accumulation of anxiety or stress or anything like that. Say you have a child, and the child is whimpering, and all of a sudden the spouse just explodes. Well, it's not just that whimpering, that moment, it's the accumulation of the whimpering. Does that make sense? Okay. Or it can be the child just making a scream all of a sudden. So even though the trigger is different, the response can be exactly the same. It's almost like a pot on the stove that's on simmer. Being on simmer means that it doesn't take much to go to boil. And yet, at some point, there is a time when you can say to the other person, the person who has the PTSD, that's enough. I really need to step away. And step away. You may have to actually just leave for a while. You may have to just go to your bedroom and close your door. And you may have to hide. I recognize now easily the events in my father that triggered his PTSD. He was gone. most of the time. He was gone most of the time. Most of my childhood, he was gone. And so every time he would come home, he had been gone between 3 and 12 months. So I was a different person, and I was the only child, so there wasn't anybody to compare me to. And either my mother would insist on me being reprimanded for something, or I would do something that upset him after he was already tired or irritated or whatever. And his response would be vastly outlandish compared to the incident. I mean, vastly outlandish compared to the incident. And what you have to understand is he's not responding to what happened. He's responding to his fight or flight from what happened years or months or weeks or a long time ago. So it's an overreaction to everything that seems to be going on at the time. And it can be unbelievably explosive and extremely harmful. The only way that I know of to survive it is to walk on eggshells sometimes, or a good share of the time. And when it's really clear that the person is calm, when you're in a really good position, when the person is seemingly extremely humble, that's the time to say gently, very, very gently, can we discuss, and it would be about one certain thing, not necessarily anything that have to do with an explosion, but something like, honey, you know, you continue to ask me to keep up with the mopping, but with 4 kids and 6 dogs, it's really tough. I wonder if you could consider either hiring somebody to help me with the mopping or giving me a hand once in a while. Okay, that is gentle, tender, kind. You use the word honey. You express the number of kids and the number of dogs, and didn't demand something. It was a question. There's a big difference between that and, I don't know why you're always late. Oof, boy, that's going to do it. I mean, right now, that's going to do it. They're going to just, because it's like having a bullet coming towards them. They have to flight. They have to take off. That's all they can do, because it's life or death. And that's the part that's so incredibly uncomfortable with anyone else understanding. But we were just, yes, I know you were just, but the bullets were still coming, even though you couldn't see them or feel them or hear them. And that's the part that's so difficult. I also think that a lot of real tenderness, being especially kind to the other person, and whenever you see a quiet moment, rubbing their shoulders, kissing the top of their head, holding their hand gently. You don't have to say a word. Say a word. Just something that says, you're okay, you're safe, I'm here. if they feel like you might fly away, oh boy, that's really tough. It's so important to make them feel like they're okay and you're going to stick around. The people who seem to be having the most problems is that sense of, I'm about to walk out the door. In the slightest, most subtle way, I'm about to walk out the door. I can't take anymore. If you're to the point of I can't take anymore, do something about it. Go to a spa, go spend the day with a girlfriend, go out to a swimming pool, to the beach, to a card game, to somewhere where you're away from what is triggering you, because most of the time a person really doesn't have much control over it. I know that with my father, there were so many times when I looked at this man who I knew loved me. I knew he really cared about me. And yet he would fly off the handle. The worst beating I ever got was when he thought I hadn't used my toothbrush. Excuse me. This is hard for me to explain to you because it's not something I've really talked to others about. I was 7 years old. We had moved. We averaged every month, but sometimes we stayed in a place for 2 or 3 days, and sometimes, I think the longest we ever stayed in any place over a period of 2 years was 2 months. It was the longest we ever stayed. So I was in and out of schools, and I was always taller, and I was in gifted classes, so it was weird, and I was a girl, and I had funny clothes because my mother made me wear really long skirts, even at a time when people wore pretty long skirts, and it was really a tough time in my life. We had just moved. We just moved to another house. It was the first night, and I came in to say something to my mother, and I saw my father coming in the door, and I could tell he was upset about something. So I sat down on the bed, and he said, "Why didn't you brush your teeth?" And I said, "But I did." He said, "Your toothbrush was dry." Well, one of the problems was moving all the time. I used to outgrow my clothes before I'd ever had them on, and I couldn't know where things were, and we hardly ever unpacked anything. It was really tough. And you go to a new house, and the bathroom's different, and everything's different. There's nothing in the same place at any time. So that night, I had just taken any toothbrush I could find and brushed my teeth because I couldn't find my own toothbrush. I didn't know what it was. And my mother was always sickly and laying down somewhere, so I didn't ask her, which was a big mistake. Anyway, I sat on the bed, and she was laying in the bed. Now, this is a toxic mother. There was no love between her and I. And so my father said, "Yes, you did not. You lied to me." And he picked up a fly swatter. Now, in those days, the fly swatter, this would have been 1954. Fly swatters were made of screen wire, and then they were covered around the edges, the sharp edges of the screen wire, with a cloth, like seam binding is what it's called, but you probably, unless you're a seamstress, you don't know what that is. But it's a piece of 100% cotton that's been folded over, maybe twice, but it rolls around the edge and it keeps the scratchiness off. And so what happened was the it was old. It was an old fly swatter, and the seam binding had given out, and the scratchy edges were there. And he started hitting me, and I was frightened, so I turned over onto the bed on both my face, and he just kept hitting me and hitting me and hitting me with the fly swatter, which of course was scratching the daylights out of me. And oh, the handles of fly swatters back then were really heavy wire. So it was heavy wire fly swatter, and a piece of screen, and then cloth around the edge, and the cloth had worn off, so there were little pieces of screen wire, which is really scratchy. And I finally crawled up toward my mother, and it's the first time I ever remember my mother saying, "That's enough, Joe." And my mother never stopped him from hitting me, except that time. And I was devastated. I could not believe how, and I was in my pajamas, so, you know, I cut my pajamas and made a mess of things, and really harmed my self-esteem tremendously. That was in 1954. In 1985, either 1984 or 1985, something came up, and I mentioned that being hit by my mother I expected, because my mother didn't care about me at all, and she never had. She wanted boys, she had me. 18 months later she had a boy who lived 4 days and died because she was Rh negative. He looked perfect. His blood wasn't compatible, and there we go. And somehow I said something to him about the difference and how much it hurt me when he hit me. And he looked at me and said, "I've died 1,000 deaths for every time I hit you." You know, that one sentence wiped out everything he ever did to me. All the times he kicked me with incredible insulated boots that had lace in the middle and then the zippers up both sides of the boots, and they made his feet look like a duck. Excuse me, because he went to Newfoundland a lot, and it was cold, so he had to have these special boots. But when he kicked me, it was really tough. And I have really bad scoliosis now, and I keep wondering if it's from that. My mother always insisted he reprimand me for every error I made in the 3 to 12 months he was gone. She kept a list of all of them and would go over them all with him. So that's why I got reprimanded by him. But she would hit me often with rulers and yardsticks and that sort of thing. So what I'm saying is, keeping from being hurt is really, really, really important. On the other hand, and keeping the kids from being bored is absolutely vital. I mean, my mother, she had never done anything to prevent me from being hurt. That's who she was. And so it was a tool. He became a tool. His anger became a tool. Now, with my husband, it's so different. I mean, we're both adults. We both have PTSD. I've had to get used to the fact that he's always angry. He's just always angry. But my dad was always angry, so it's not so hard for me. If you're not used to somebody who's always angry, that it's difficult. I'm sure, and it may be impossible. And maybe you need to think about this, and that's one reason I'm making this. Maybe you should think about this before you get involved with someone with PTSD, because you may want to rethink that situation. You're not going to cure it. You're just not. It's how they are. I've heard people say that there are tapping helps, meditation helps. It depends on the person. Walking, getting them outdoors as much as possible. Anything that distracts them. Tiny technical things are very hard for them. Working with anything mechanical, like fixing a car or working on a motorcycle, staying away is a really good idea. But it's probably not going to go away. I don't know of it going away. I know my uncle was contemplating a divorce when he died because it was just so hard. He was just so damaged. But if you're able to survive it, when the person is not in an angered state, they're aware. They're really aware of what's going on. And they can be so tender and sweet, like my dad and like my husband. It's as though you have to be able to tune out the anger when you hear them angry. And it's hard. It's not easy. And that's why I'm saying that think about it seriously. If someone you know goes to war, or someone you know is raped, or someone you know is in a tornado or a car wreck, or there's so many places that this can happen, it's a really tough road to walk down, being with someone with PTSD. And if it's yourself, oh boy, you have to forgive yourself. You have to recognize that everything you've done at the moment was the best you could do. And you don't promise that you'll never do it again, because you can't promise you'll never do it again. Certain triggers are going to make it so difficult to face the person you've insulted or injured or harmed in some way emotionally, or saying something that was inappropriate. It's just part of the problem that you're faced. PTSD is hard, but we're all human. And is the person worth it? For me, I have to say yes. I've tried. I think routine helps. We have a routine where we watch a movie together at night. That seems to help. When things change, when stuff comes up, when other mild conflicts appear, or children, or dogs, cats, cars that break down, computers that don't work, it all adds up. So when that isn't going on, all the things you can possibly do to have a calm conversation seems to help later in their way of looking at you and apologizing to you. And the only way you can get around it is when they're in that kind of a good mood, you say, I really appreciate it when you hold back and aren't as angry. And maybe it'll help. It depends on the person. Everybody's different. Everybody processes grief different. Everybody processes fear different. Everybody processes trauma different. But if you want to survive, you got to try it all. You got to try to find a way to be as soft-spoken and kind and helpful as possible, because they really need it. And so do you. Thanks for being here. Any comments or questions, just leave them in the space below. I'm happy to answer anything you want to ask me. I'm here. The reason I'm doing this is because I want to leave behind what I've learned, and I want others to know what I've learned so that they may have a question or look for an answer, and I might be one of the ones they pick to give them that answer. But I'll also do personal answers anytime. Thank you.